Hello friends, I am Arpit and I am here with today's analysis. Today is 4th of September and by this weekend, that is 9th and 10th of September, India is going to host the 18th such summit of the G20 and the first ever summit to be hosted by India. So there is going to be a lot in this week and the next week also about G20. This is the first, I would say, video on G20, and in this video, we are going to cover the basics of G20. How was G20 formed? How many tracks are there? What is the agenda for India? What is the priority areas for India from this particular summit of 2023? Who are the members of G20? What is G20 Troika? And which will be followed by the special invitees also. There are some countries which have been invited, some multilateral organizations, they have also been invited to the summit. It is going to be a mega event. And what a time when India got the presidency of G20. India assumed G20's presidency in December 2022. December 2022, one such, I would say, time period when the world was at, a war-like situation, kind of a war also, we can call it, the Russia-Ukraine crisis, which left the world divided, which left the world in inflation. Definitely, the war had a negative impact on food, fuel and fertilizer inflations. The world is experiencing climate-induced disasters. Climate change or global warming is rapidly rising. There is a conflict between the developed world and the developing world, with respect to climate finance. And in amidst all this, India assumes presidency of G20, that too for the very first time. What will India deliver out of it? What is India's objectives or what are India's hopes from this summit? We need to decode that, and we will be decoding that in this particular session. But before reaching to that portion, we should first understand what G20 is, the basics of G20. And before that, since we are here on the opening slide, the G20 logo which has been designed by India is this. Now we should know that every country assumes presidency of G20 for 1 year. Means last year, December 2022 till December 2023. This is going to be the period of India's presidency of G20. And then India will pass on the presidency or the baton to another country. So India has designed this logo, Bharat, India 2023. Specifically, it has been mentioned 2023. Why? Because it is for 1 year only. Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, which simply means that the world is one family. And hence it has been written, one earth, one family, one future. There are problems the world is facing. I just mentioned about those problems, and we have to find solution to those problems collectively. Just like a family does in times of crisis. So we have to, act like a family, the entire world. We'll have to shed off or keep aside our differences and fight the common enemy. Common enemy, that is inflation, common enemy, that is climate change or global warming, common enemy, the disasters coming due to global warming or climate change. This is, I would say, the main fundamental behind this, or main philosophy behind India's G20 presidency. Now, we assumed this presidency on December 1st, 2022. And as soon as we assumed this presidency, our External Affairs Minister declared that New Delhi will seek to emerge as, New Delhi means India will seek to emerge as voice of the Global South. Now, Global South, I have explained it earlier also, but yes, I'll explain it now also. The developing and underdeveloped countries of Asia, South America and Africa. So we want to be the voice of the global South. We want to keep the concerns of the global South in G20 forum. You know, in G20, basically the world's top 20 economies are there. In these top 20 economies, there are developed economies as well as there are developing economies. G20 is not a forum of only developed or only developed. It is a forum of mixed, developed and developing. These are the 20 largest economies of the world presently. And India is the 5th largest economy. You should know that. So, but we want, there are many concerns of the global South. Global South means these developed and underdeveloped countries belonging to largely these 3 continents. So we want to keep their concerns in G20. And we need to find a sustainable solution to the issues which they are facing. What kind of issues they are facing? Again, this brings me to those 3 challenges which I mentioned. Like there are small island nations which are at the threat of submergence due to global warming. Global warming is causing sea surface levels to rise and there is threat of submergence of those islands. So we'll be talking about global warming in this particular summit. We'll be also talking about climate finance. It is these underdeveloped and developing countries which are impacted by climate induced disasters and then do not have funds to, reparation or, for bouncing back, I would say. They have to rely on funds from the developed world. This is what India will be advocating for. In that Russia-Ukraine crisis, the food, fuel and fertilizer prices went up, which had the maximum negative impact on the global South. These are already struggling and their struggles intensified. This was the scenario. India will hold over 200 meetings in 50 cities. Now you might be seeing that in multiple cities including Kashmir, Arunachal Pradesh, meetings were held. And in the Prime Minister's very recent interview that has happened yesterday, he was asked about this question, that why those places were chosen. So his response that was, why those places should not be chosen. Those are part of India and G20 presidency is for all India. So every nook and corner should experience the G20 feeling. The people should feel connected that yes, something is happening here also. Not all the things happen in metropolitan cities, especially Delhi, Mumbai or Bangalore or something like this. So over 50 cities were chosen for 200 meetings. Out of these 200 meetings, some are left, but the 100 meeting milestone was achieved in April 23. Now, what are these meetings for? These meetings are just the build-up for this annual summit, which is going to happen in September. The outcomes of this meeting will be discussed in the summit. Meetings of various groupings, like there was a meeting on business, the B20 it was called as. We covered in the daily videos the G20 health ministers meet. So health was covered over there. So like these meetings were there. And finally there will be this annual summit in September 2023 and 9th and 10th September are the chosen dates for the summit. Now about G20. The history of G20. First of all, it was established in 1999, you should know. It is a group of 19 individual countries and one European Union. G20 was established as a group of finance ministers and central bank governors. Central bank is basically, for example, in India it is RBI. Now, in the 1990s, actually, the world started to get more and more closer. Means there was globalization which was intensifying during the 1990s. India was among those countries who did globalization in 1990s. LPG reforms, 1991 we did. And Hence, the finance minister and the central bank governors of these 19 countries and one EU thought to come together. These are the world's 20 biggest economies. And they thought to come together. Why? So that they could align their economic policies. It should not be like, any shocks happening in any of these countries is impacting all of them. If their policies will be aligned, then the impacts or the negative impacts could be minimized. This was a thought process while forming this particular organization. The 20 biggest countries, the finance ministers of these countries, and the central bank governors. They used to meet every year. G20 was elevated to the forum of head of the state or head of the government in 2008. Now in 2008, there was this, financial crisis or recession which impacted USA. And that not only impacted USA, that impacted many countries across the world. That was the basic, I would say, agenda, or that was the basic aim for these to come together to minimize the impact. But yes, when you are connected, impact will be there. That was called as the subprime lending crisis of 2008, which started from USA, impacted many other countries, including India. However, on India, the impact was minimal. But that was an eye-opener for all the global leaders. The global leaders said that finance minister and central bank governors meeting is not sufficient. We should also be meeting with each other. So in G20, two tracks were created. First track was the financial track, which was created way back in 1999 when G20 was formed, comprising of finance minister and central bank governor. The second track was called as the Sherpa track. Sherpa is an individual who is representative of the head of the state or head of the government. Means here in the Sherpa track, the head of the states and head of the governments will be there. And then these people decided that every year, let them do the meetings, let Sherpa also do the meetings. Every year, once, we all will meet, head of the state and head of the government, and we will call it a G20 summit. So that is the highest level meeting in G20 called as G20 summit, which is going to happen on 9th and 10th September here in India. Then all these finance track, Sherpa track, they have done their meetings. We just read in the last slide, 200 meetings will be conducted. So 200 meetings combined of these two tracks have been conducted. The outcomes of those meetings will be discussed in the summit now. Summit will be attended by the head of the state and head of the governments of these 19 countries and one EU. Next point, very, very important. It is a forum, not a legislative body. No laws are being made. You need to understand this. And whatever discussions, whatever deliberations we are going to have over here in the G20 summit, they will not be, I would say, lawfully implementable or lawfully forceful on anyone. Means its agreements and decisions have no legal impact. Means whatever will be discussed or whatever the outcomes of this summit will be, if any member country is not following it, it is not like that we are going to punish that country or we are going to sue that country lawfully. No, it does not have any legal impact. But yes, they do influence countries' policies and global cooperation. They will definitely leave, an impact on the future actions of these member nations. So this is what the legality of G20 is all about. Then here are some statistics. G20 members represent around 80% of global GDP. Since they are the 20 largest economies, the maximum of GDP will be concentrated over here. 75% of global trade and 66% of the world's population. Just to remind you of the fact that 80% of the global GDP is also equivalent to 80% of, or approximately 80% of global emissions come from these 20 countries. So 79% exactly of the world's carbon emissions come from these 20, I would say, members, 19 countries and one EU. The G20 consists of two parallel tracks, the finance track led by finance ministers and central bank governors, and the Sherpa track. Who is a Sherpa? Sherpa is a personal representative of the head of the state or head of the government, whoever is having real powers. A Sherpa is a personal representative of head of state or head of government who prepares an international summit. Now it is Sherpa and these finance tracks and all. Financial tracks meetings are going on separately, but it is majorly the Sherpa track meetings which does major of the meetings, and the outcomes of the meetings is shared by the head of the state or head of the government, whatever the case may be, and it is presented in the summit. Presently, just before the summit, from September 3 to September 6, the last Sherpa meeting is going on. It is kind of the final preparation for the summit. The Sherpas of all these 20 entities are here. They are doing this meeting for 3-4 days from September 3 till September 6, and then the outcomes of this particular last meeting of the Sherpas will be discussed in the summit. This last meeting that is happening right now, September 3 to September 6, the Sherpas are consolidating all the previous meetings and then giving a final document to their respective head of the state or head of the governments. Basically, Sherpa track clears way for a head of state at a major summit. So major summit is there, the annual summit. Now we talk about the members, G20 members. A question from in prelims can be framed from here, but yes, aspirants are generally confused ki how to memorize these names. My suggestion to you is go continent wise. It would be easier for you to memorize. Like let's suppose in North America we have all the three major: Canada, US, Mexico. South America, Brazil, Argentina. Then UK, Germany, France, Italy, Turkey. Saudi Arabia, South Africa, India. This is basically Africa mein se only South Africa is there. From Europe, these four plus EU is there. Then Asia, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, although one city of Turkey, half, that is Istanbul, half is in Europe, half is in Asia, but we largely consider Turkey in Asia. Then Russia, China, India, Japan, South Korea, Indonesia, and then finally the last continent, that is Australia. So these are the 20 countries. Out of these 20 countries, there are G7 countries also included in it. So let us look at G7, G8, G20. This, I would say, breakup. The G7 countries: Canada, North Americas, France, Europe, Germany, Europe, Italy, Europe, Japan, Asia, UK, Europe, United States of America, North America. So how many are these? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. EU is also considered G7's part. 7 countries plus 1, EU is also considered as its part. Now this G7, just to give you a briefing about G7, group of 7, this grouping was formed in 1976. In 1973, there was this episode which is called as the oil shocks, where the most industrialized nations, they were denied oil by West Asian countries just because of their support to Israel. Israel was not at good terms with these West Asian countries where oil reserves were there. So these formed a grouping. That time G6 was there. So these 6 countries came. Canada joined in 1976 and hence it became G7. 1998, they included Russia also in this grouping. But Russia annexed Ukraine in 2000, Crimea Peninsula, which was part of Ukraine, in 2014, and hence Russia's membership was cancelled. From 1998 till 2014, G7 was called as G8. But post 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea, it again became G7. Now G20, the additional countries are over here. Argentina, Australia, Brazil, India, China, Indonesia, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, all these. So this entire is G20, G7, G8. If a statement comes that G7 is a sub part of G20 or in terms of membership, then definitely yes. G7 in terms of membership is a sub part of G20. Not in other sense, but in terms of membership, which simply means that all the members of G7 are part of G20 also. Now, the agendas under India's G20 presidency. Actually, India has formed 13 working groups. These working groups, they do what? They do all the groundwork, collect all the data, collect all the knowledge for discussion. Actually, earlier there were 11 working groups. Working groups like working groups on energy, trade and investment, agriculture, digital economy, environment, anti-corruption, etc., etc. These are the domains in which these working groups actually work, collect data, collect knowledge, collect expertise, and then that is used for discussions. India created 2 new groups. Earlier there were 11, now there are 13. The 2 new groups created by India was Disaster Risk and Resilience Group, number 1, and Startup 2020 or Startup 20 was the second, which obviously deals with the startup ecosystems in these 20 countries, 19 countries and 1 EU. Engagement group were brought to the forefront by India under its presidency. So another fact for prelims, which of the following working groups were created by India? So these disaster and startups. Key priorities for India. Now India has, this theme of Vasudev Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future. And, India sincerely believes that, problems, if they are there for the entire world, then the entire world has to find a solution for them. We are keeping the problems, discussing the problems, and we are wanting our approach to those problems, our approach in finding solutions to those problems should be by all, by participation of all. This also is in line with our agenda of all alignment, the policy or the strategy which we are currently following in the global scenario. Or you can say that this is also in line with our philosophy of being Vishwamitra, which was being spoken about by the Prime Minister in his Independence Day speech also this year. So collectively we want to find solutions for those. The major priority areas, first is green development. Green development can also be termed as sustainable development. Examples like green hydrogen if we talk about, or sustainable highways if we talk about, or sustainable shipping if we talk about, all this is green development. Climate change is already there, global warming is happening, and on the other hand we have to develop also. For developing there will be emissions which will further lead to global warming. So India is wanting that we should adopt sustainable ways of developing. We should not stop developing, but we should adopt sustainable ways to develop. So this is there. Then fostering climate finance. Now money has to come from the developed world to the underdeveloped world. We have covered a topic on this, and this has been discussed in COP 15 2009 Copenhagen, that $100 billion will be invested by the developed world in the developing and underdeveloped world from 2020 onwards per year. But as per an OECD estimate, only $83.3 billion have been transferred from the developed world to the developing or underdeveloped world in a year till now, and that is the highest. That has not been met, and then we are also talking about increasing this goal. As per the estimates given by UN, approximately $6 trillion are required till 2030 if we want to meet the 1.5 degree goal by 2100. 1.5 degree goal is that climate change or global warming or the global average temperature should increase by 1.5 degrees only by the year 2100 from the pre-industrial levels. Pre-industrial levels is 1850 to 1900, these 50 years. So we need funds for that, and India will definitely be talking about it, and that is how we are going to be the voice of the global south. One such example. Next, technological transformation and digital public infrastructure. Now, digital public infrastructure is one such domain in which we can say safely that India has achieved, expertise. Aadhaar is the backbone of our digital public infrastructure, which has made the service delivery to the people, governance to the people, easy and seamless. I've given this example before, but I'm taking it again, that now the people are receiving subsidies directly in their bank accounts, which earlier they were not having access to. People, we are able to identify, the government is able to identify the beneficiaries in a very easy way because of their, unique identity which has been given to them by Aadhaar. And multiple other things have been linked by Aadhaar. Your bank accounts have been linked by Aadhaar, PAN cards have been linked by Aadhaar, your vaccination certificate was available to you with the usage of your Aadhaar card, nobody thought. And in future also there will be multiple usages of this digital public infrastructure. This has to be robust. We are living in a digital age. We are living in such an era where we need to overcome the age-old problems of poverty, hunger, malnutrition, and definitely digital public infrastructure is going to take us a long way. Many developed countries in the world are also struggling to transform their governance from physical governance to digital governance. They are seeking India's help, and India yet developing but has developed this is ready to help them. That is why we'll be picking this up for discussion, because this has wide-ranging impacts, positive impacts. Then readying multilateral institutions for 21st century. For the 21st century, the multilateral institutions like the UN, like World Bank, IMF, all these should be ready. They should be accepting the realities of 21st century, not the 20th century when they were formed. Obviously, India was not in a prominent position at that time. Hence, India's not so prominent position is also reflected in those multilateral organizations. For example, India is not a permanent member of UNSC, but yes, presently in the post-COVID era, India's, I would say, stature in the global geopolitics has risen sharply. Countries are looking up to India, and hence India should be playing a crucial role in these multilateral organizations. Then we will also be focusing on 3 F's: food, fuel and fertilizer, and these 3 F's have become prominent since 2022, or to be very specific, February 2022, when the Russia-Ukraine crisis started. The prices of food, fuel and fertilizers all went up. This is something which is uncalled for, and it is something which drastically impacts the global south. It impacts us also. It has impacted us also. Last year was the year of inflation, and inflation was beyond the limits which the RBI has set for us. So we also faced challenges, but as we compare our challenges with other countries, the level of challenges we faced were definitely less. But the global south, their challenges are extreme. Next is the broader theme of women-led development. We'll also be focusing on this because this is something which will make us from developing to developed country. Half of the population, if it is ignored, if they are not made to participate in developmental processes, then things will not proceed for us or for any other country also. Now on trade and investment, we'll be focusing on resilient global value chains. Resilient global value chains means these value chains, logistics, transportation should be, immune from any kind of shocks. Resilient global value chains was a term which was in trend just when COVID struck us, because during COVID there were many logistical hurdles which were faced by many countries, and after that all the countries started talking about resilient value chains, resilient logistics and all. So here in trade and investment, the prime focus will be here, and also on small and medium industries, how the small and medium industries of these 20 entities can be linked with each other so that their business grows. On development, our focus will be on SDGs, that is Sustainable Development Goals, which were, introduced by the UN in 2015. The target year for meeting the SDGs is 2030, which is not so far. So we will be talking about this as well. This entails, there are 17 goals, and this entails overall development of a country or an individual also. On employment, we'll be talking about addressing the global skills gap. So if there is deficiency of skills, then we'll be talking about how to provide skills. Sustainable financing for social security. Social security also we've covered, like the pension, the insurance and all to the workers should be available. And obviously we'll also be talking about gig and platform workers, although this gig and platform workers are not so prominent in the developed countries, but yes, in developing and underdeveloped countries they are growing rapidly. Then group on agriculture, we'll talk about enhancing food security and nutrition, sustainable agriculture with a climate smart approach. So we'll be talking about this as well. Then on the health side, what are we going to talk about on the health side? We've talked about some things on the health side in that G20 health ministers meet. We also we read about that we want to make this health sector prepared and responsive for health emergencies. Okay. Then vaccines, therapeutics and diagnostics should be resilient, and as well as they should be strong. On education, we want to talk about foundational literacy and numeracy, strengthening research and innovation, tech-enabled learning and the future of work. And on energy, we want to talk about low-cost finance for energy transition. Energy transition is a concept in which presently we are, let's suppose, relying on fossil fuels, coal, petroleum and all, but slowly and gradually we are transitioning to renewable sources of energy. So there are some risks attached with transition. What are those risks? How we need to address them? And not only India will face those risks, the entire world will face these kind of risks in the time to come. Next is G20 Troika. This term also is a standard term which we should know. G20 Troika is nothing but a group of 3 members. In the center is the present president. Here is the ex-president, and here is the future president. The present president of G20 is India, the ex-president Indonesia, and the future, that is next year, we are going to hand over the presidency to Brazil in December 2023. So these 3 countries form the G20 Troika. What is the significance of this Troika? We'll see. But before that, we should also understand one more fact, that this is the first time in the history of G20 that all the members of Troika are developing countries. Now last year, the Troika was different. Last year, Brazil was not part of Troika. India was here, Indonesia was here, and Italy was here. So never in the history of G20 this has happened that all the members of G20 Troika are developing countries, but this is the first time it has happened. Again, a fact which UPSC in prelims can ask you. Okay. Next, it should be noted that the bloc does not have a permanent secretariat. There is no headquarter. Permanent secretariat means headquarter. There is no headquarter of this particular G20 grouping. and the presidency is supported by the Troika. So Troika is supporting presidency. If president wants, anything from the past, it will take from Indonesia. Wants to pass it on to the future president, it will pass it. So this Troika is there, which is kind of considered as the moving headquarter or a temporary headquarter, you can say. So another fact to be noted is G20 does not have a headquarter. It is the Troika which is acting like that. Now, invited countries. We know the 20 countries, but some countries have been invited to G20. First is Bangladesh. Second is Egypt. Now, when the Prime Minister of India visited USA, on his return, he also went to Egypt and he gave a formal invitation to the Egyptian president to come. Third is Mauritius. Fourth is Netherlands. Fifth is Nigeria. Sixth is Oman. Seventh is Singapore. Eighth is Spain. And ninth is UAE. So they are being invited as special guests. Does this mean that membership will increase? No, as of now, no sign of increasing membership. But yes, India a few days ago floated one thing in the among the G20 members, that African Union should be made part of G20. And unanimously, all the G20 members agreed to it, that African Union should be part of G20. So we don't know in this summit as of now whether the membership will increase or not. No such, I think, hint also has been given by any of the officials. But yes, this is the only hint which is there with us, that a few days ago India advocated for African Union's permanent membership to G20 and all the G20 members agreed unanimously for that. Then, apart from the countries' heads, there are multilateral organizations head also which are invited. The first is Asian Development Bank. It is a multilateral bank which is based in Manila, and the head is being invited. The second is CDRI, Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. It is a body which was, formed by India, proposed by India and headquartered in India. It is headquartered in New Delhi. The main job of this body, Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, is to give knowledgeable inputs to any country for building disaster resilient infrastructure. It will not fund, but it will give the knowledge. Next is Financial Stability Board head. This Financial Stability Board basically aims at integrating the, I would say, monetary policies of the world and overall economies of the world so that stability is maintained. There is less and less volatility. Then IMF, International Monetary Fund, it is a specialized agency under the United Nations. IMF gives loans for meeting liquidity crisis. The head of IMF is also invited. Then International Labour Organization, which takes into consideration the labor laws and all. And labor laws of different countries are also a challenge in trade and investment among those countries. So this person is also invited. Then International Solar Alliance, ISA, again an international body which is headquartered in India. Gurugram it is headquartered, and it comprises of all the sunshine countries. The main aim is to develop the solar energy capacity of the countries. Then Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. It is an organization of the developed countries. Okay. Basically Western Europe and America. That is also being invited. United Nations, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General. How can we leave a global organization like United Nations being invited? Then this person everyone knows, World Health Organization, WHO, is also being invited. And World Trade Organization, WTO, it is a related organization under United Nations. This also is being invited as special invitees or special guests to this year's summit. Now, what India wants? I have mentioned earlier what India wants, but yes, now explicitly I am going to mention that India wants a consensus document to be delivered. What is a consensus document? Document or the outcome of the meeting or outcome of this summit, which is on 9th and 10th of September, should be acceptable by all the members. But the question is, what are the challenges faced by India in this aspect? Obviously, there will be challenges because on one side, there are G7 countries, which is so-called the developed West, which is so-called anti-Russia presently. And on one side, we have Russia in G20. In the center, we have India. On one side, we have USA, which is part of G7. On the other side, we have China. USA sees China as an imminent threat, a competitor. In this scenario, will India be able to deliver this consensus document is still left to be seen. Obviously, we'll be discussing about this when the G20 summit will be over. The outcomes will be there in front of us. We'll definitely be studying about it. But yes, as of now, Russia and China are posing challenges for India as they do not want to agree to the G7 or the Western countries, what they're demanding. And India, on the other hand, has this pursuit of delivering a consensus document. So there are challenges in front of India, but yes, let us see how India overcomes those challenges. After all, we have claimed to be Vishwamitra. So I would say that this present, or the upcoming G20 summit is a test for us to prove that truly are we a Vishwamitra or not, or up to what extent we are Vishwamitra. If we are able to deliver a consensus document, then definitely that will, further elevate our stature in the global geopolitics. So this is the summit, the 2023 G20 summit. New Delhi is the upcoming 18th summit meeting or 18th meeting of G20. It is going to take place in Bharat Mandapam International Exhibition Convention Center, Pragati Maidan. This has been newly constructed, and what an architecture it is. I'll be covering a separate session on this also, because this is something which is related to our culture, and it is fascinating. The foreign delegates who are coming here are in awe of this architecture. The media is covering it, and I've seen glimpses of it, but it is very, very beautiful and it is grandeur. So this is there. It will be the first G20 summit to be held in India as well as in South Asia, and summit dates are 9th and 10th September 2023. So these are some of the basic details about G20 which we discussed. How G20 was formed, how it was expanded, why it was expanded in 2008, what is G7, G8, G20, what are the priority areas for India, what are the challenges faced by India, what India wants to deliver. Will India be able to deliver? Keep tuned with us, we'll definitely let you know. But all our coverage will be relevant from the exam point of view. That is UPSC prelims, mains, as well as this is going to help you in interview also. So this is it from today's session. I will be meeting you with some more exciting news pieces tomorrow. Till then, keep studying, keep reading, keep writing, and definitely keep revising. Jai Hind.